Metal Max Xeno Reborn is a remastered version of the original 2018 game, Metal Max Xeno. It was released on the PC, the PS4 and the PSvita, but has now been re-released once again on the PS4. It's had a number of minor and major additions and changes, including things like visual upgrades and a complete overhaul to the gameplay. The original game could probably be considered a bit basic when compared to this version, as it does feel like a new game entirely. This is not just a straight remaster or a cleanup of the original, it's virtually a remake, and in my opinion it's a rather good one. The game can be a little bit repetitive, and it definitely does require the player to do a lot of grinding, and it does ask you to retread the same ground many times over. That said, it's not always a bad thing. So what do you actually do in the game? Well, at first glance, Reborn looks like a standard vehicle-based action game, and it kinda is, but from very early on you realise that it's much more of a turn-based JRPG hybrid. You play as Talus, a human survivor of the machine apocalypse who over the course of the game attempts to build a resistance to fight back and retake the world. During the game you'll be able to recruit a varied cast of survivors, each with their own stats and vehicles. You can even get a little dog sidekick and then strap a stonking great cannon to its back because, I mean, you know, why wouldn't you? Each member of the group can be geared up with weapons, armor, accessories, and of course leveled up. You're also able to customize all of their skills and their vehicles, allowing you to create a strong battle party. The skills that your characters can obtain require skill points to unlock, and skill points are granted when a character levels up. These points can be spent on individual character skill trees, and you can get, among other things, passive bonuses or offensive attack skills. The vehicles have a vast amount of customization, from actual weapons to paint jobs. As you explore the world, defeat enemies and complete missions, you'll be gathering money and lots of materials. These materials can be crafted into usable weapons and additions for your vehicles. What you're seeing here is the tank that you get at the very start of the game, so we'll use that as an example. You can slot a deadly array of custom weapons into your tank and to the other vehicles to suit your needs or playstyle. Armaments like chain guns, cannons, or rocket launchers each have their own power ratings and stats, which can be improved. Some can produce elemental damage, which certain types of enemies are weak to. You'll even be able to scavenge fully functional abandoned vehicles that you find out in the wasteland. You can also install mod chips that grant passive bonuses or change how a weapon functions entirely, as well as bigger engines to power your war machines. Honestly, to explain every single thing that you can do with this system and tell you about everything that it offers to the player would take absolutely hours, but I think you get the idea at this point. Most of the time you'll be embarking on a mission from the HQ known as the Iron Base. It's a large fortress containing only a few human survivors, and it's thought to be one of the only safe places left on the planet. This is where you do most of your character management and maintenance, although you can do some while out in the field. It's basically your standard hub area or home base. You can rest, talk to other characters, take on side missions, sort your equipment, develop new vehicles, craft new parts, and much more. The main gameplay loop that you engage with has you venture out into the wasteland, completing missions, destroying enemies, earning XP, leveling up, gathering materials, and collecting money. Then you bring all of that back to the Iron Base, use what you've gathered to improve your party, and then venture out again. There is of course a main story and many side stories for you to follow, but the game is built around the grind. There are enemies that you can fight in the very first area that will completely decimate you in a few hits, which teaches you that you simply aren't ready to fight them yet. If you do happen to die while out exploring, you needn't worry, you'll simply be teleported back to the Iron Base and fully healed with zero consequences. And lastly, let's talk about the combat. Fans of the original 2018 release will find this version of the game to be pretty much unrecognizable. In the older game, the enemies would just kinda spawn in and then you'd have to deal with them. In this remake, the enemies are visible on the battlefield at all times except for at very long distances. This means that you can choose when and how to engage, making each encounter a little bit more tactical. Another new feature in this version of the game, which ties into what I said previously, is the ability to snipe an enemy before combat even begins. When you're spotted by an enemy, a solid line will appear between you and them. While this line is drawn, a meter will fill at the top of the screen. If that meter fills completely, a standard combat encounter will begin. However, you can choose to attack the enemy using a new preemptive free aim system. You'll either destroy the enemy outright or start the battle with an advantage. Most of the more powerful weapons that you can equip to your tank have limited uses, which does reset when you retreat to the Iron Base. However, machine guns tend to have unlimited ammo, so it's probably best to use those for the weaker fodder while using this free aim mechanic. If you aren't able to snipe the enemy quick enough, or the damage that you inflict isn't enough to instantly destroy it, a hybrid real-time and turn-based battle will begin. You can freely move your tank around the environment, but it rarely helps in avoiding an attack due to the turn-based nature of the fight. As you're moving around, you won't actually be able to attack, but you will notice a small circular meter located at the bottom right corner of the screen. When that meter fills up, time will stop and you'll be allowed to select an attack. Once you've selected the attack, it will play out and you'll be allowed to move around again until that meter fills once more. It's also important to know that you can actually get out of your tank and move around the world on foot. In fact, there's some dungeon-like areas that you can only explore when not in your vehicle. The combat is virtually unchanged when exploring on foot, but you'll obviously be using the weapons you have equipped to that character as opposed to the tank. The game also features a ton of consumable items for healing, repairing your weapons, reviving other characters in your party, and much, much more. So that about does it for what the game actually provides to the player, but what did I personally think of it? Did I enjoy it? I mean, kinda, yeah, I suppose so. You know when you play a game sometimes and you don't enjoy it, but you also feel like a lot of other people probably wouldn't enjoy it either? Sort of like how I felt about the Babylon's Fall demo, if you guys remember. I played that and I thought it was absolutely awful, but at the same time, it didn't really feel like an opinion thing. It kind of just felt like the game was, just that poorly made. But with Xeno Reborn, I felt like it was just okay, maybe slightly better than average, but having said that, I feel like a lot of other people would enjoy it more than I did. As I've said a million times on this channel, I'm not just going to say I didn't like a game, therefore it's bad. I'm not that kind of person. I think the game is much better than the amount that I personally enjoyed it, if that makes any sense. But before I try to explain any of these specifics, there is one thing that I really wanted to point out, and that is the censorship. Now, normally I would just mention it to you and let you be aware of it, give you a quick opinion and leave it at that, but in this case, this doesn't just censor the original art, it fundamentally changes it and alters the characters' personalities. So I'm going to put 3 examples up on the screen now. The original art, which is on the left side of each of the images, was actually produced by a renowned hentai artist called Oda Non. His artwork is very well loved and it just seems a bit disrespectful to change it at all, especially when the original art was so good, at least as far as I'm concerned. To be fair, I will point out that his original artwork is in the game, but you have to unlock it for New Game Plus. That, in and of itself, really muddies the water because wouldn't that suggest that it wasn't actually censored at all? Oh, and these changes are for both the PlayStation and the Switch versions, by the way, but yeah, if this was Sony censoring the art, for example, then why would they allow it into the game as an unlockable, quote, feature? I really don't know what to think in this case, because if no one required them to be changed, then why were they changed? If anyone has more insight into this topic than I do, then please let me know because I'm at a bit of a loss. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but I think whoever was in charge just wanted to change the art because reasons, and then to try and avoid the backlash, they added in the original art as an unlockable bonus. I mean, why not just give all players the option to choose which art they want from the beginning? I mean, I don't know, I just don't get it, but it is speculation of course, but if that's the situation here, then what absolute cowards they are. If the updated artwork was the only art that ever existed for the game, then I'd say it looks fine, right? But when you look at the old versus the new side by side, you can see exactly what they did, and it's just sad. I actually saw something on Reddit regarding these changes, which is actually where I found these images, and some people were explaining how the new look of the characters really changes their personalities, and I'm not going to harp on this for much longer, but just look at the faces. They feel like completely different people to me. I guess the last thing I'll say on this subject is that you should also be aware that there's a number of specific scenes, sections, missions, and dialogue that's been completely removed from the game, so yeah, I think they knew exactly what they were doing. But all of that aside, I think the game is actually pretty good. It didn't exactly wow me or feel that fun to play, but I can see certain types of players getting totally hooked on this for many, many hours. I think visually it looks alright, the character models look particularly good and almost stand out among the low-res environments. They almost look like they were lifted from another game entirely and dropped into this one. I'm not saying it's bad, but it is noticeable. They all have this very smooth and clean Dreamcast era look to them, which I do quite like, but on the other hand, I wasn't ever expecting this game to be photorealistic. We do have to remember that this is a relatively low budget title, and overall, I think it looks good enough. The environments, as I said, are quite low in detail and the enemy models aren't really much better. but it's not like I look at them and think they look absolutely awful. They do the job perfectly well, but you should probably keep your expectations in check. I think the amount of customization available is outstanding though. There is just so many things to create or obtain, and decking out your tanks is just fun to do. Having multiple characters to consider plus their gear and vehicles gives you a ton to do, and the massive amount of variation in regards to what you can equip gives you the ability to make actual viable builds for each of the characters, which is something I didn't expect to see. The one thing in the game that I wasn't actually that happy with was the combat, and I'd guess that's probably why the game didn't grab me as much as I'd hoped. I didn't hate it or anything even close to that, but I found it very cumbersome and just kind of awkward. When I first laid eyes on the game, I expected it to be a completely free-form combat system. You know, you roll around the wasteland just blasting enemies in real time. As I said earlier though, that really isn't the case, and the fact that it straddles the line between turn-based and real-time actually compounds my personal issue with it. I think I would have preferred a full-on turn-based battle system where you roll around the wasteland, and if you collide with an enemy, you move into a separate battle screen, or perhaps a fully real-time system would have been better. The system it uses is fine, but the fact that it straddles the line just isn't really for my tastes. And so I guess to simplify things a little bit, I'd say that the story and the theme are interesting, the visuals are average, the customization and RPG elements are brilliant, and the combat didn't really do it for me personally. In my opinion, Metal Max Xeno Reborn is a quirky but intriguing little game that has a lot to offer for the right player. I don't think this is something I could easily recommend to a lot of people, but if you're into JRPGs that require some grinding, this could definitely be for you. While it might not look that great, the tank building and the RPG side of the game give you a lot of content to play with. It's just a shame that the combat didn't fully click with me. Ultimately, I think the game is absolutely greater than the sum of my enjoyment of it. Just because I wasn't in love with it doesn't mean you can't be. If you're watching this video and looking at this game right now and you like what you see, then I would definitely say you should give it a try. On the other hand, if you aren't up for a grind or for how the battle system is set up, I'd say you'd probably want to skip this one. If you enjoy the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.